This week on the podcast, who thought 30 years ago we'd be looking to the Polish to work out how we can grow our own economy? Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6 and 7 figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancott, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. So I think it's probably the first time when inflation has really hit me, isn't it? We just went to M&S to buy lunch, didn't we? And I genuinely stopped. And what did I say to you? I was like, something's gone wrong.
Yeah, you thought that we'd scanned too much stuff or something.
Yeah, or the till had scanned something wrong or whatever. We literally went between podcasts to buy, a couple of salads and some sides to go with it and various things. And the till said £20 and 12 pence. I genuinely stopped. And you went, no, I think that's probably right. I looked at it and it's like, so it costs to nip out and grab a sandwich and something between your lunch in the day now costs £20 and 12 pence. It's insane.
You're painting a very false picture of what actually happened. We went out and we got 2 smoked salmon salads, which
£6
each. And then we had 3 sides with it. A little pot of prawns with some dip, some
these things are tiny. They should be
pastrami Cornish on things, which were not very nice, and a giant sausage roll, which were £3 each. So when you put that all together, getting up to £21, not unfathomable these days.
It shocked me, didn't it? Anyway, before we move on to this week's news story of the week, I got something else. I was listening to somebody in the week talking about the profits at the big pub chain. And they were talking about Michelin and Butlers, but we talk a lot about Wetherspoons, don't we? Quite a lot.
Love a Wetherspoons.
Yeah, we go to our Wetherspoons and we often, they're just an individual Wetherspoons is just like a monstrosity of a business in its own right, isn't it? Just like what's going on.
But what happened last night? We went to Wetherspoons in our town because we really wanted a very specific beer, and they
didn't serve any beer.
They had no draft beer at all because of the heat. All of their pump system and their cooling system had gone down, so no draft beer at all in
So
Wetherspoons.
Anyway, we always, and I guess people will always say, like, how can it be so cheap? And like I kind of said to you, like they could put their price up. I don't think it would make that much difference, but it would make a huge difference to their bottom line. So I just wanted to run some numbers on Wetherspoons, like at a per location basis on average, just to sort of give you some like context behind this. But basically, if I took their turnover, which was just over 2 billion last year, they've got 800 pubs. Divide it down. Basically, if I know it's every pub will do different amounts, but basically their average pub turns over 2.5 million, basically £2,537,000. How much profit do you think that each pub makes on average out of that 2.5 million? So that if you think about what goes into that Wetherspoons over a whole year, everything that happens in your and we've got small Wetherspoons. Most of them are much bigger than ours, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you think about how big it's how many plates of food are served, breakfast, lunch, dinner, beers, the volume of staff, the security, everything that goes into it to keep. What do they keep per pub at the end of the year?
I would say 5 to 6%.
No, pounds and pence. So how much? What's the profit of a 2.5 million turnover? What's the profit?
150k.
£92,000 is what if you divide all their profit down by the number of locations, that's what their profit before tax. I would add it's before tax. They've got to pay corporation tax at 25% on that, haven't they? So 70 grand, all that for 70 grand.
They should just put everything up by a penny, shouldn't they?
It's just insane. I just can't believe it. So basically, they make on average a profit margin of 3.6%. It means that for every pint they sell, they keep 3.6 pence in the pound. So absolutely staggering. What's even more staggering is the tax that they actually pay. So for every £92,000 pre-tax in profit that that one branch makes, how much does it contribute in tax? Not post, obviously not post, pre-profit tax. So one single Wetherspoons generates what for the government?
We're about £1 million.
£975,000. You're absolutely right. So Wetherspoons gives £1 million to the government per unit and keeps 92,000 before getting taxed at 25% on that 92,000. So keeps about 70 grand.
It's insane.
Does it feel? It feels like a weird exchange, doesn't
and that
it?
risk,
when you put it like that.
Would you risk all of that for less than 100k per site?
Well, one slight blow in the wrong direction, and 3%'s gone, isn't it? And you're at zero.
Yeah.
It's like the work/effort for reward balance just seems insane. Like just running that. I mean, this is why you couldn't You wouldn't privately run that business with everything involved in it, even a single branch, and then just go, oh, I've got 70 grand this year. Like, literally, it's easier to get a job. That's just insane. You can get paid more in a job. Anyway, that's not even the news story, but I just thought, like, hospitality, honestly, if that's all they can make at that level, no wonder all of our little hospitality places are just like struggling, going out of business. Pubs are going out of business. I mean, how can you make it work? But anyway, let's move on to this week's proper news story of the week. So absolutely love this, and in true Simon fashion, I've curated this episode perfectly.
There is not a news story that you don't love. You said when we were lying in bed this morning on a romantic Saturday morning, talking about what we're going to discuss in the podcast, you said, can't we just do news stories of the week? I love them so much.
Oh.
You don't want to do the deep dives anymore.
There's just so much to talk about every time. They just spark so much interest, and it's only really business. I only bring business news stories for obvious reasons. I'm not coming with non-business ones.
That's not true.
Although this is technically a bit non-business. The headline totally grabbed me here. The headline says Costa del Pols: How Brexit Changed the Face of Expats in Spain. Now, this is a fascinating story about... in fact, I'm going to read you the first bit, because first of all, this just made me just realise how just stupid some people are. But it opened with, when Roger and Carol, who were 80 years old, woke up in the morning of June the 24th, 2016, in their home overlooking a golf course in Spain, they had some big regrets. Do you know what their big regrets were, Claire?
I remember that day. It was Brexit Day.
The couple had lived in Spain for 15 years. They both voted for Britain to leave the European Union, and they were shocked when the result came in. We didn't think it would actually happen, said Roger, sipping a cold beer on Wednesday lunchtime in Fungarola. When the couple are visiting friends, Roger had worked at Luton's Vauxhall car factory from the age of 16 and retired at 55 early and moved to Spain. I mean... Basically, they then went on to make a catalogue of really poor decisions, which is they panicked that they wouldn't be able to stay in Spain. So they moved back to the UK, only to realise that they probably could have stayed in Spain because they gave them sort of grandfather rights on it. So now they're stuck in the UK and they live in Luton, and they basically describe it as they hate every minute of it. But with the freedom of movement completely gone, they've said that we're completely stuck. And obviously, what do you think? Obviously, they've made a catalogue of poor decision making there, haven't they? So they've topped it off with one last decision that they're now going to make. What do you think it's going to be?
Go back.
They're going to vote for reform at the next election. So that's what they've decided.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because my dad voted...
Which is either good or bad.
I'm pretty sure my dad voted to leave, and he said a similar thing. He was like, I don't think it will happen. And even if it is voted for, he didn't think that the government would go through with it. And so he was just like,
It's not how referendums work, is it?
No, but so he voted to leave on the basis that he was like, I'm just interested to see how the government will wiggle out of this if enough people vote to leave. And really, I think the consequences...
That was the consequences.
Were a little bit... There were quite a lot of people that thought, nah, it's not going to happen. So let's just do this just to, stir the apple cart. And it didn't really go to plan, did it? And
anyway,
here we are.
In a turn from that point onwards, basically, the story goes to revolve around how British buyers in Spain have basically collapsed from 80% in that time to 8%. So that's reports from Taylor Wimpey Spain. Basically, it's so difficult for British people to buy out there because now they have to prove an income of at least £25,000 a year to get this very, very non-lucrative visa. And it just doesn't work for most retirees. So retirees where it was very much an option, like Roger and whoever it was who worked they worked in the Vauxhall plant. They didn't need to prove income. They had freedom of movement. They can go and live in Spain. It was cheap. For as long as they wanted. For as long as they want. That's now closed. And that's reduced the amount of people that can move there to 8%. But the news story, if you remember, was Costa del Pols. Who's replaced the UK people buying all of the homes in Spain, Claire?
Polish people.
Polish people,
jumped
indeed.
41%.
It's just absolutely exploded. So effectively, Polish people have completely replaced the migration of British people buying in Spain, and especially at the very, very high end. So they're basically saying that Polish people are coming buying £1 million homes in Spain, no problems whatsoever. And obviously with freedom of movement and their economy having done so well in the last 20 years, they are now taking all the spoils that us lovely British people used to have before we basically, the very, very apt sentence, cut our nose off to spite our face.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
So Anyway, that's going to segue us on really nicely to our deep dive this week, which is how Poland became the fastest growing country in Europe. And I bet most people don't even know this.
Now, this story came about when we were sitting waiting in the queue for the car wash. And you turned to me and you said, do you think that we, and you meant the colloquial we, not me and you.
Can I just add something in here and why I said this? So I just read a story that it was written by Rishi Sunak, weirdly enough, about, and it showed a graph of what the Polish GDP per capita had done in the last 20 years versus Japan, the UK, and various other things. And cut a long story short, because we're going to talk about it in detail, basically there was a massive gap and it's really close. So
right. So we were sitting in the car wash queue and you turned to me and you said, do you think Brits will be washing the cars of Polish people?
Or do we think we'll have to go over there and start
go
washing
over there to Poland? Do you know how 20, 30 years ago there was this massive influx of Polish people into the UK, and a lot of them were coming in for what at the time was seen as quite low skilled jobs like fruit picking and washing cars and things like that. And so you were asking me if I think Brits will ever be going over to Poland in search of better jobs.
Yeah. And what did you say? It's a fucking stupid idea. So what you on about?
I don't think Brits will, but I can see other economies in Europe. So, you know, like French, German, other economies that are struggling. I think the problem with British people is their lack of openness to other languages. I think that in itself will just be the biggest barrier.
I mean, the problem with British people is the generosity of our welfare state. There's no need for them to do that, is there?
No, but there's people that do want to work and want good jobs. So would you relocate for a job? I think a lot of Brits...
washing cars in Poland?
Hang on. We've seen, not washing cars. I'm talking about job relocation. I think we've gone a bit beyond car washing, haven't we? And I'm talking about like some of the white collar jobs that are probably really good in Poland at the moment. You know, like working in finance, working in tech, things like that. Brits will happily go to Dubai and America and places like that where they speak British, but I think that just the language barrier in itself will be a barrier to people going to Poland. That's my take on it.
Possibly. So let's start with setting the scene. So for those that aren't aware, what shocked me was this. I showed this graph that showed GDP per capita from 1990 to today and predicting forward to 2030. And I absolutely fell off my chair and I just could not believe what Poland had done. And obviously, I can't show you a lovely graph which really explains it very, very well. So I'm going to tell you in numbers just briefly what it looks like. Basically, in the year 2000, the GDP per capita in Poland converted into dollars, so it's a like for like, was 4,500 versus the UK's 28,000. So Poland represented 16% of the UK's GDP per capita. So effectively, we were, 5 times richer per person than a Polish person?
6 times. But
6 times. In 2025, that has risen to 51,263 in Poland versus 62,009 pounds. So basically, today, Poland represents 83% of the level of GDP per capita in the UK. And they do something's called a PPP adjustment, which effectively takes into account the cost of living in Poland being so much less than the UK as well. So there's a slight adjustment to that. In nominal terms, it's slightly different.
So essentially what we're saying, cost of living, way, way, way lower than the UK. Yeah. In fact, it would be interesting if we had that number. Just tap away on your laptop and find that number, Simon, while I'm talking. But what they're saying is that for every £1 that a British person earns, a Polish person earns 83p.
Yeah. And back in 2000, they earned 16 pence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been kind of described as like one of the greatest economical miracles of all time. Now, I did look at this to say, what is the official, are Poland the fastest growing economy ever within a certain period? And apparently I can't quite claim that because there are periods where China have outdone that. Yeah. So there are, but only really China and South Korea have ever beaten Poland in the speed in which their GDP and their economy has grown over such a short space of time. But we can 100% claim that Poland has been the fastest growing country in Europe by a long, long way over that time.
Ever.
And also, we're talking about the gap with the UK. Actually, the graph they put was had Japan and the EU on it. And actually, this year, they've just overtaken Japan. So they've closed a gap that was massive with Japan, and they're now richer per person than a Japanese national as well. So
why are we looking at this, Simon?
Well, the big question is why? I guess everyone's asking that question, because how can we not do this in the UK? Why can they do this? And what is the formula for success?
But not in the UK. What UK businesses can learn from this?
So well, of course, we'll transfer it to, is there something that a business can take from it? So I've kind of got...
Well, there is something business can take.
We know, we're going to go through it. So I've got kind of 8 key things that Poland did from a macro perspective, and we're going to turn each of those into what a business has done as well. So shall we start with like the first thing that they did, which is effectively back in 1990, they did something called shock therapy to their entire economy. Now, this is effectively like ripping a Band-Aid off and suddenly saying everything that isn't working, we're going to go in a completely different direction. So back in 1990, 90% of the GDP of Poland came from state-run companies and businesses. And they decided to put a load of policy in place to make it really competitive against those businesses. And that reduced by the mid-1990s to only 40% of GDP coming from state-owned businesses. So effectively what they did is they created an economy and they created competition in their economy.
This was the end of communism.
Yes.
So up until 1989, it was a communist society, and they immediately decided, new government, new way forward, we want to be a capitalist state.
Now, not to get political, but this is an unbelievable and very recent story for why going down a socialist and communist route is not the answer, isn't it? Because there it is on plain paper when somebody cut the ties with communism and became the fastest growing economy over 30 years, and their people became 5 times richer over a 30-year period versus a socialist and communist regime. So very, very interesting. What can we take from that from a business standpoint, Claire?
Is to rip the Band-Aid off and do everything in one go.
Absolutely.
The risk is that we become so fearful of rocking the apple cart that we try and break it down into these small chunks that are manageable for individuals, and, don't change too much in one go because we don't want to put too much risk on the business. And actually what we end up with is this really prolonged period of slow change that causes constant disruption, constant backlash, constant headache and upheaval, and actually you spread that out over normally years and years, whereas you could just do the short, sharp shock. Yes, you will lose some people. Yes, you will lose some customers. Yes, you will lose some profit, but you will very quickly get back on the right track.
Yeah.
Instead of just this slow, steady distraction and upheaval in the background that runs for years and years. So I can't stress enough, if you need to make a big change, plan it and do it. Don't try and break it down into small manageable chunks because you're scared of the consequences.
Okay. Quick question. Do you trust the numbers your accountant sends you? Or in fact, are they even sending you what you need at all? If your business turns over £1 million or more, you're already in the top 10% of UK companies. But here's the problem. Most accountants are built for the other 90%. They're built for compliance, not for businesses making big decisions on tight margins. So if you've stopped trusting your numbers enough to make confident decisions, head over to profitcashgrowth.com and book a discovery call. Let's get your business back in the room with people who actually understand it. So the second thing they did that was quite key was they kept their own currency. So back when the euro was created, they kept the zloty and they still have it now. And interesting parallel to the fact that obviously the UK, even when they joined the European Union, kept their own currency, and actually it puts you in a massive amount of control because you're still controlling your own interest rates and all those kind of things. And I think the parallel to business is about control, isn't it, Claire?
Yeah, keeping control of the levers that matter.
Yeah.
So the reason why this was successful for Poland was that it only needed, when it could control its own currencies, like in particular, you talked about interest rates there, it was able to control its own interest rates, and therefore the rate it was paying for different world currencies and things like that, which we know from the Iran war, for example, how much that underpins what's happening in your economy. And so you look at like the 2008 financial crash, and it weathered that so much better because it was able to use this lever of interest rates so much more effectively in its own interests. It didn't need to work with this bigger block and say, oh, well, we need to take everybody's interest into account and come up with this blended thing that doesn't really work for anybody. And I think with business owners, that's what we can really, really take from this, is to keep control of your levers, like really understand what it is that's driving your business's economy and keep control of it. So not becoming too reliant on any one thing. So anything that ties your hands, you want to avoid. So no one customer that can put pressure on you and push your prices down.
No one large supplier that could go bust.
No one large supplier or one large channel. So, if you sell on like platforms and things like that, like Amazon, don't ever be too reliant on them, because they tie your hands and they back you into a corner. Equity, it may be very, very attractive to get investment in your business, but if something happens, you have got to act in the interest of everybody. You can't just be your own economy and make your own decisions. I get some, debt covenants again. You think that it's the right thing to do to go and get lending from the bank because you want to grow, but ultimately it ties your hands, because every move you make, you've got to think, does this go against something in the terms and conditions that the banker said I must maintain X amount of cash and do this, do that, etc. So just really, I'm not saying that you should never do anything that ties your hands, because there are really, really good examples where it's been the making of a business. But just really, really think twice about something that does mean that later on your position will be more difficult and you will not be able to fight your own corner. If as soon as you're in a position where you need to consider other people's interests, then your position is weakened.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because one of the other big benefits to Poland is they were actually, I think, one of the only EU countries that never went into recession in 2008. And it's
they
because
grew,
of
didn't
what
they?
They actually carried on growing, and it's because it's linked to what you said, which is they kept hold of the lever of their being able to pull their own interest rate lever and control their own monetary policy that's really specific to their particular economy, rather than being just dictated to on a broad brush by the European Union on that one. So they really did have like this. This is going to sound terrible for us, but the best of both was they had their own currency, but they had EU membership. It just sounded like the holy grail of what you need to have. And that does move me on to the next one, which was, I mean, this is probably the biggest one. And again, it's going to make us feel very sorry for ourselves as British Brexiters here. And that's EU membership. So they joined the EU in 2004, and it was completely transformational. Basically, just everything just boomed from there on in terms of their ability to to have the freedom of people, get the talent in and out as they need to, and also the counter point to that was that it opened the floodgates for foreign investment to come into their country very, very easily.
Yeah, so this was something that they actually started in 1990, and this is how we're linking it back to businesses. We're saying this is about laying the foundations. Is in 1990, it knew what this long-term plan was. It wanted to join the EU, and a part of that was putting the groundwork in terms of updating a lot of its laws, making sure that, it's very well known that when you have a communist state, there's a lot of corruption and things like that there. So, making sure that there wasn't the opportunity for corruption, particularly with Russia being so close. There was so much money in Russia that would happily have flowed into Poland, and they could have gone down that short-term route, but that would have ultimately harmed the country. So they put in the groundwork, they put the laws in that meant that corruption would be restricted, and they laid the groundwork so that they were able to join the EU. And I think that's really something that is difficult for businesses, and I know I struggle with this a lot when you've got this longer term goal, maybe this 3 to 5 year goal, and you're like, I just give me a win now, just something happen now. And you've got to keep your eye
long term thinking
on that longer term goal. You've got to have your systems, your controls, your governance, everything in place first. You've got to do that hard work. You can't shortcut it. If you shortcut it, then weak foundations cause bigger cracks.
Yeah, you have really big problems. Well, potentially you could just take your business out later down the line, couldn't it? Because you hadn't built it right in the first place. That's the biggest challenge. Great.
So the next one is to make yourself attractive and really understand what makes us the choice. And Poland did this really, really well with all the foreign investment that you were talking about, Simon.
Yeah.
so cumulative, they had about 21-fold investment compared to other EU countries. And most of that was coming from Germany and Austria. And that was linked back to the prior point about putting the rules and regulations in place to make sure that it was a safe place for investors to come to. So they were really, really clear on what they wanted. And they were really clear on why people would invest in Poland. In terms of their location, they're in a very good location in terms of connections to like the rest of the world. But also they were in that luxurious position of having cheap labour still. So they had cheap labour, but they were in the EU. It's like gold dust, those two things, isn't it?
This is why we keep hearing about how important it is here in the UK about we've got to get growth, because everything does follow that growth. And this is an example of, like, you can imagine it, like you're sat in one of the neighbouring countries and suddenly Poland's getting 10% growth every year. As that GDP grows, that money goes back into the economy, boosts their asset prices across business, across property, across everything else. So therefore people look thinking, I'm going to shift my money there because that growth is... So before you know it, just becomes this flywheel that is just compounding and compounding and compounding. And you become so attractive to, investment way beyond the capital that's within your borders. So you're just bringing capital in to, grow and grow and grow and grow. And this is why it's literally so important to get that growth, because everything else just follows.
And with businesses, it's like, why does a customer choose you? It's like, that's such a critical thing to understand. And you cannot just simply answer that question by saying, we do a really good job or we're the best. It's like
says that.
Everybody says that. So you have to have a specific reason why somebody comes to you. And then you need to put a moat around that reason. So with Poland, it was because it was finally seen as a new area that was safe for investment.
Yeah.
If they couldn't have just been a new area, because there were other places that were new areas like Romania and Latvia and places like that, they needed to make it safe. They needed to put a moat around it by joining the EU, having the laws in place and all of that kind of stuff as well. One thing on its own wasn't enough.
Yeah. You see this in business a lot with companies that, especially sales-led companies or agencies that are prepared to completely put their neck on the block and basically guarantee that there is no charge. It's just a win-win. It's that business model that says, I'm that confident that I say, Mr. Business Owner, for every £1 million more I generate, you pay me £100,000. If I don't generate it, you don't pay. You pay a percentage of your growth. And that's a really, really compelling story. And it's the same with the investment. Poland is saying, give me that 100,000. We can continue to grow by that. We win, you win. And it's the same thing in business. And being able to sell your products and service in a situation where it's a no-brainer because there's something in it. It doesn't have to always be money related, but there's something in it. And the best businesses operate on that basis that we can either save you money, but it's guaranteed you don't pay unless we deliver, or we can make you money. It's guaranteed we don't pay unless you deliver. And it's quite a compelling story for the person buying the product, isn't it? The next one was all about education. They took education extremely seriously from the 1990s onwards. They basically invested absolutely huge amounts in their universities, colleges, and everything else. And naturally, the education followed the growth, followed business growth, followed everything. And the thing we take away from this in business is that the best businesses are run by business owners who are self-learners, self-starters, and never stop learning. They never think they've finished and learning when they leave school or whatever else. They're constantly curious, constantly learning, and therefore they're reapplying those learnings into skills, which then turn into profit. And that's exactly what happened when Poland turned their entire population and educated them further. And they took it very, very seriously. And we've seen that. I mean, that's what the UK was built on, great universities, great education, which grew the UK over all the years. So they're just repeating what the UK did, on past tense.
Because, back in the 1990s, although it doesn't feel that long ago, it's like 36 years ago. So it's an entire generation ago.
Yeah, completely different time.
And the schools and the education system were very focused on, it's highly documented that a lot of Polish builders and things like that came over here at the time, didn't they? Because the UK economy was booming in terms of building. So it's like the education system was completely modernised. They had this long-term vision. They had this long-term vision of Poland being this manufacturing hub and things like that. And they really doubled down on the education system, making sure that the university courses were focused on that. And it was just all intertwined with what the long-term vision was.
Yeah. And the next one, which is probably the biggest one, which I just think is unbelievable, and we really need to take a leaf out of their book here in the UK, is they had cross-party political consensus for 30 years. So actually Poland's had 17 different governments from left, right to centre since the 1990, but all of them signed up to a broad direction of economic policy that remained consistent throughout all that time. So they all had effectively an overarching shared vision for the country and what happened, so that whoever was in power, they would all be fighting for that same vision. It's just more around the tinkering around the edges, I guess, that they had control of. So just what a wonderful way of proving somebody wrong who says that what places like Dubai can do with a single leader and a long-term vision cannot be replicated in a democracy because of the changing 5-year political.
Yeah.
That's generally what people say. You can't have both. You can't have one with the, and they prove that you kind of can do that.
And that's so true in a business, isn't it? Is that
you need that departmental consensus across the business so that a single vision is bought into, don't you? And
one of the things that I know I wish I'd done better is when I bring new hires into the team is spending more time up front getting them on board with the vision and the goal and the why and the where we're heading and all of those types of things. And I think most issues that I've had with my team stem from the fact that they don't buy into that. And 9 times out of 10, it's because they don't understand it, because I haven't taken the time to explain it and make sure that they really get it and that they're on board with it. If somebody isn't on board with it, they can't be in your team. They absolutely cannot work for you if they're not on board with your long-term vision. And the more senior people you bring into the business, the more important that becomes. Every time you bring a new hire in, you change something, you launch a new product, it's got the risk of deviating you from your long-term goal. And so you just have to constantly keep coming back from that long-term goal. Does this decision help us reach our long-term goal? Yes or no? If you can't answer yes, you don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not one of the points I put down here, but I've just thought about it now. But one of the biggest things has got to be that they were just bloody hungry for it, weren't they?
Yeah.
Like they were down there at, like, say, 16% of what somebody in the UK earned. They were just bloody hungry for it for 30 years. And it's just something that when you're, so to speak, at the top, that hunger's not there. And again, if we put this into business, the longer you're in the business, the more comfort you've got in your business, actually how hungry are you for it and how hard are you pushing? And we see this time and time again. Actually, you see some of the people that, or businesses that have delivered growth and discipline over a very long period of time, they actually make themselves deliberately uncomfortable. And I remember seeing this do you remember we watched Gordon Ramsay, and he said, every time I get a little bit comfortable, I have to agitate the pain. I have to force myself into a situation of jeopardy.
I think that one of the things that is not on our list, because we've got to the end of them now, but I think that one thing that isn't on here is fear. And I don't think economists would generally talk about this, but Poland was in a situation where it could have gone down 2 routes. It could have joined the EU and the Western world, or it could have gone east and it could have got closer to Russia. And I think that most of the country were aligned on the fact that they didn't want to get closer to Russia and they wanted closer ties with the West. They thought it was safer. They thought it was the long-term play. And I think that fear of that other option was driving them. And I know that being a business owner, the fear of having to work for somebody else and get a job genuinely drives me. The fear of not having money drives me. The fear of not being able to live the lifestyle that I want drives me. And I think that in itself is like you've got to have a fear.
You've got to have those fears and drivers built deep inside you.
If everything is so cushy and you've got no reason to do it, you never will.
Yeah. And not to get political, but that's part of our challenge with things like welfare. If it's at a level where it's if it's at a level that's slightly comfortable, like you really can live off it, you can have a few of the luxuries you want, whatever, then actually where is the drive? And actually if you then get out of it and go into work and you earn less and whatever else, it's like you can understand how people end up in that comfort zone, which is kind of what it is. Anyway, in summary, I think one of the key aspects is that we've been through a bunch of things, but the key is that everything we've talked about is they're all bold moves. They're all massively radical, and they did them all together over a period of time. Yeah. It's almost, you can understand it now when you paint it like this compared to what we're seeing in the UK over the last 10 years, where, we talked last week about Andy Burnham and the things he might do. And we came, as I said at the conclusion, more of the same, more little tinkering around the edges. There is no grand plan. There is no bold move. There is no preparation to upset people as they did, rip the Band-Aid off. There's none of that. So therefore the outcome will be what the outcome will be, and it won't be what we perhaps hoped for.
Yeah.
Just be more of the same.
I think they, bringing it back to the business element of it, they had this bold plan. So they got this vision in place. They figured out how they were going to fund it because they needed all this foreign direct investment to come in. They figured out what systems, processes, rules, regulations they needed in place to make that happen. So they joined the EU and changed their laws, and then they implemented it.
Yeah.
And I think that it really is a good example of it was just a business plan. Yeah. It was just a business plan that they implemented.
Executed.
They got all
really
the stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
They thought about what needs to be true in order for this to be a success. And then they just did it.
Yeah. And most importantly, they reverse engineered everything.
Yeah.
They knew where they wanted to be in 20, 30 years' time, and then they worked backwards from it to build the plan out from there. So fascinating.
So look,
absolutely fascinating.
I think the moral of the story is if Poland can do it, then our small businesses in the UK here, we're not trying to change the world. We're not trying to turn around a country. We can do it too.
Yeah. It's about making sure you have a plan, and all of that plan talks to all parts of the plan. Yeah. It's a holistic, cohesive plan with an end in mind, and you know exactly what that looks like. Brilliant. Right. Let's move on to this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra, Claire, where you've got a little something for us.
This is a quote that I read on somebody's LinkedIn, and I wish that I had, I knew whose LinkedIn this was, because this just had such a profound effect on me that it immediately changed my diary for the entire week, how I approached some issues I was having with the team and things like that. And it was just a really simple quote, and it says, ask yourself, does this build my business, or does it make me feel like I'm building my business?
I know you sent me this.
And I sent you this, and I was
this
just
is for all the procrastinators out there, isn't it? That's kind of, I guess, the point, isn't it?
This is for all the people that like to be busy.
Yeah, but that's procrastination, isn't it? Busyness. It's a form of procrastination.
This is I think some people out there listening to this will really resonate with this. And last night, we left the office about 7 p.m, didn't we? We got some food on the way home. And then when we got home, what were we doing? We were putting up pictures in the bedroom. And then we decided to do some grouting in the garden. And it's 11 o'clock at night, and we've got a torch out, and we're grouting, and we're just we're doing things. We like to get stuck in and do things and get it done. And I like to get stuck in and get things done. I enjoy the doing, I enjoy the fixing, that brings joy to me. And so, of course, the classic thing to say is to get out of the way and let the team do it, blah, blah, blah. But when that's your joy, and that's why I'm in business, it's very difficult to step back from that entirely. But it definitely made me think about the things. Am I doing this because I enjoy it and I want to do it? Or actually, am I doing this because I've told myself that I'm the only one that's growing this business, and actually I got out of the way of a few things and I gave problems to my team and they solved them quicker and better than I would have. So it really made me think about things.
It's like a reverse of just the completely classic constant on the tools thing you always hear. It's just a cleverer version of that. Get off the tools.
Yeah, but so, one thing that I've been through lately is I've been building my reporting portal. I've been using Claude Code to do that. And does this build my business? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it also made me feel like I'm building the business. And the smart choice would have been to outsource that to somebody or to give it to one of my team as a project to do.
You can actually combine those two things and get satisfaction on both sides.
Yes. But it's really made me think more about the choices of the work that I'm choosing to do. Yeah. Actually, would this be better given to somebody else? Because let's face it, there is a never-ending list of things that I could do.
Of course there is. Great. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that podcast. I certainly did. Fascinating. And as always, if you feel like you might have outgrown your accountant, you'd like to work with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth, nip over to the website, profitcashgrowth.com. On there, you can book a quick discovery call where she can chat with you about your business. And as always, if you can rate, review and subscribe to the podcast, just hit the follow button wherever you listen to get episodes every single week, and just share it with any business owner friend that you have. Just pop it over to them. Say, perhaps you'd like your business to be as successful as Poland, or you could end up washing their cars for them. And we'll see you again next week.